Welcome to Light Overheat with Professor David Yamani. Today I'm going to go through the top 5 of my top 10 books on guns in America. Number 5 on my top 10 list is the only book in the top 10 that's written by a journalist, and that's Paul Barrett's book called Glock: The Rise of America's Gun. And this book is really written in an engaging manner, which is great in and of itself, but it's also about much more than just the Glock. The history of Glock that's in here is incredible, but it's also a social history and an economic history and a business history of guns in America in the contemporary period. So anybody who's interested in any of those topics, not just interested in the Glock, will love this book. Okay, number 4 on the top 10 list is a book that I've spoken about before in an earlier video in which I talk about books on the NRA, and that's Matt Lacombe's Firepower. This book is an excellent analysis and accurate analysis of the NRA. I won't say more about it than that because I've already spoken about it. But if you want to know an accurate and interesting and persuasive history of how the NRA of today got to be the way that it is, read Lacombe's book. Number 3 on my top 10 list is a book by political scientist Mark Joslin called The Gun Gap, subtitle The Influence of Gun Ownership on Political Behavior and Attitudes. And it does do that, but the reason I like this book is that it goes much deeper. It roots people's views about gun politics in their experiences with guns. So I said in one note when I was reading the book that guns become a wedge issue because they symbolize core values of parties and are rooted in different experiences with guns and risk tolerances. So he, in chapter 4, highlights how gun owners feel safer with guns because they're familiar with guns, that guns are a common household object, they are normal. Sounds familiar. And in contrast, non-owners are fearful of guns. They see them as dangerous and as a threat to personal as well as public safety. And so these different views of guns that are so manifestly political today are rooted deeply in different experiences with guns. And as I say commonly, we have 2 different social worlds around guns. One world in which guns are very normal, and one in which guns are associated primarily with negative outcomes. And Joslin's book really captures that. Number 2 on my top 10 list is a book by an OG contemporary gun studies scholar, Jennifer Carlson, her book Citizen Protectors: The Everyday Politics of Guns in an Age of Decline. I've read this book cover to cover twice. I constantly refer back to it for information and inspiration. I've written a lot about it on my blog. I'll try to link to some of those so that you can see some of my broader views, some of the things that I most agree with and also disagree with. But the thing that Carlson really gets about the contemporary movement for concealed carry comes at the very end of her book. The first sentence in the last paragraph of the book, in fact, where she writes, "Guns solve problems for the people who bear them." And if you don't understand that as a starting point, you are not going to understand Gun Culture 2.0. Okay, we've come to this, the number 1 book about guns in America on my top 10 list of books about guns is Adam Winkler's book Gunfight, subtitled The Battle Over the Right to Bear Arms in America. And there's so much to like about this book. It tells the story of the 2008 Heller decision, but it interweaves that really fascinating story of that legal case with chapters that trace the history of gun rights and gun regulation in America through history, right? So beginning in colonial times and all the way up to the present, and that interweaving of the story of Heller with the history of guns in America makes this a very compelling read. It's the best single volume treatment of the history of guns in America, in my view, and also the story about the most decisive gun case in the Supreme Court in American history. Possibly the Bruen case ultimately will become more important, not because of the specific ruling, but because of the stuff about how gun cases should be decided going forward. But that doesn't trump the significance of Heller in leading eventually to the McDonald decision and the Bruen decision. So if you want a one-volume history of guns in America that's written in a very interesting fashion, but also satisfies people's scholarly interests, Adam Winkler's Gunfight is still the number one book on my list. What books have you read that you think should be added to a top 10 list on guns in America?